We're ready now to try a tune that was written by Carolyn, Turlough O'Carolyn, whom we referred to earlier, the last of the and greatest of the Irish bards. Now, Carolyn's life was documented in a great biography by a fellow named Donald O'Sullivan, sometime in the 50s. That thing has been hard to get for a long time. He also wrote out as many different tunes attributed to Carolyn as he could find, of which there were over 200. And this, I would venture to say, in 1992 is very likely the best known. For years, the tune called Carolyn's Concerto was his best known tune, but this one has become so popular from playing of bands like the Boys of the Loch, and has actually been played by a lot of different guitar players. It lends itself so well to the instrument. And I would say from all the recent versions, it has eclipsed the concerto and become the best known of Carolyn compositions. It was actually the first one. Now, according to the story that is related in O'Sullivan, Carolyn was a young, aspiring harper. This would have been back at the tail end of the 17th century when Ronald Reagan was still a sportscaster in Iowa. I hadn't even gone to Hollywood yet, and I was a young fellow myself. And old Turlough was out there in the west of Ireland somewhere. And as an aspiring young musician, someone mentioned to him that he seemed to be a very creative player, but perhaps would not be the best-known virtuoso on the harp, that in fact he probably should try composition. So he went out and made up a tune, which is in fact Sheebeg Sheemore. Now the title, not being a scholar of Gaelic or much of anything else, Sheebeg Sheemore, this is generally translated as the big hill and the little hill. My understanding, though, is she means fairies are good people. There's no doubt that the title is supposed to refer to a place where there was a battle fought between rival factions of leprechauns. So possibly we should say the big fairy hill and the little fairy hill, Sheebeg and Sheemore. Actually, I've got it backwards. Little is beg and more is big. It certainly is easy to see why it's such a popular tune for guitarists. It lies extremely well on the instrument, and it's just a spectacular melody. So let's get ready and try Sheebeg and Sheemore. So there's Sheebeg and Sheemore, as you can see, one of the really great melodies by Turlough O'Carolan. Quite a popular tune, quite possibly the most requested at weddings anymore. Everybody wants to have that pretty tune, Sheebeg and Sheemore, played at their weddings. I actually think the next time I get married, it'll probably be Gary Owen. That would be mostly because it was the theme song for George Custer when he went into his life. Never mind, that was a different sort of wedding. What we need to do, first of all, before we start looking at this, is get the bass string tuned down to D, because we're going to be playing in D, in drop D tuning, as it's called. So everything else is like standard. We got that low E string down to D. And we're going to be looking at an awful lot of unusual left-hand shapes here. This is something that you get into a lot of, trying to imitate the sound of the harp in a very rough sort of way on the guitar. And what you're trying to do is get the notes to ring out for a long time. And what you generally wind up trying to do is get notes all on a different string. So we get shapes like this instead of doing this. Something like that. It will be on 3 different strings. And in fact, that's how we're going to start the tune. If we look at this, we're on the 7th fret with our little and ring fingers on the 2nd and 3rd strings. And you're going to want to really refer to the tab to get some of these shapes, but we'll go over them pretty slow here, the left hand. That's how we start. And I just missed it there. You can see there's a little bit of a stretch. You want to be able to stretch up there with your index finger without moving those 2 fingers. Get your index finger up to the 3rd fret of the high string. Again, if that feels hard to do, try for the 2nd string, try for the 1st string. Try to just stretch that thing just straight out and aim it right sort of towards your tuning pegs. And if you come back, you'll see it's not so bad. And we don't really change the position there. Then come over, you do the middle finger or thumb if you like for that bass note. That's all pretty straightforward. Now, okay, here's another one of these harp-like positions. Middle finger on the bass string, 5th fret. Your little finger will go to the 7th fret of the 4th string. And then we're going to put down the ring finger on the 6th fret of the 3rd string, and finally the index finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd. So we lay them down, and once they're down, we leave them down. And you can hear how nice the sound is ringing like that. You can even leave some of them down on the next note. And sometimes I'll do that for the pickup, which involves taking it with the right hand, now going with the thumb and then the index and middle fingers quickly. Or sometimes it would be, and then doing a little hammer-on kind of trill thing. Okay, it gets easier now. That shouldn't cause problems. That's not much of a stretch. Okay, so we should be okay for the end of the first A, except at the very end we want to come down. Since that would be your middle finger, leave that finger down, and then the last note there on the 5th fret of the bass string would be your little finger. Okay, now for the second A, we're going to be adding a middle voice to this. And adding the middle voice is something I'm very partial to on the guitar. Generally, if you get the bass and the melody, you're doing pretty well, but when you can add a harmony, really just one more voice in the middle, it makes it sound extremely full on the instrument, and especially for these harp tunes, it sounds very good. So this time, our first chord is going to look like this. Now we get to really do some stretching. We're just going to have the middle finger on the 5th fret of the 5th string, the ring on the 7th fret of the 4th string, little finger 7th fret of the 2nd string, and the index finger on the 3rd fret of the high string. And once again, if that feels hard, move your index finger down, move the other 2 up. And now there you've got a stretch. And when you come back here, you'll find it really isn't so bad. Let's gives those muscles there a chance to stretch. So there's the beginning of the second A. Then we get to pick all that up. That shouldn't present problems. You can just be a little careful about your right hand. Watch what's going on there. That's nothing to do really on the left hand. You've got to be careful now to use your ring finger on the second string, index on the fourth. Yeah, these are all fairly easy shapes. Try those. Then here. Once more. Okay, and then we'll go back to this stuff. Now this stuff again, we aren't changing our position, we're just adding some more notes with our right hand. Okay, now we got some sort of churchy chords. I think of those as like a gospel kind of harmonization. So look at what we have. That's the little finger on the 7th fret of the low string, and the index on the 4th of the 4th, and the middle on the 5th of the 5th. Okay. The next one we make just by making a little bar with our index finger, picking up the middle finger. The little finger doesn't move. Okay. Then slide your middle finger down to the 5th fret and put your index finger back over just on the 4th string, and we'll play the open 5th. And after that, I would slide down yet again with my little finger to the 4th fret of the bass string, and come with my middle finger to the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and play those along with the open 4th. Now you could finger it like that, you would think it's more logical, but this sort of keeps your hand in the same position. So for all 4 chords, with your little finger down there, there's not too much motion in your hand, and you'll find it doesn't take too long. That's not too bad there. To take you out, sort of with that big D chord position. And that'll get you ready for the B. Now the B, again, we got some strange shapes here that we're trying to imitate a harp. Okay, that's straightforward enough. What's going to happen on this first passage, we'll keep our little finger down on the 7th fret of the 2nd string. And we'll start with the ring finger down on the 7th fret of the 4th. Then you pick it up, but leave down that little finger. Now, we're putting the ring finger over to the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and the index finger is on the 4th fret of the 4th string. You still haven't moved that little finger. He's still there. Now we're going to leave these two stationary where they are, and then just come up with the index finger to the 5th fret of the 4th string. And then at the end, again, the ring finger and little finger aren't moving, but the index finger goes back down to the 4th fret of the 4th string, and our middle finger comes over to the 5th fret of the high string. I'll try that whole thing a couple of times. Once more. Okay. All right, we could use our thumb here, or, well, actually coming out of that previous position, your thumb is the freest finger that you can use. So the only real alternative would be use your index finger, but I would use my thumb. So that chord then is made, that G chord, thumb and little finger, just to be extreme. And after that we get a very normal looking chord, an A chord, and then a normal D chord. Now on the D chord, to get that next little phrase, I slide up. I slide the middle finger, you see, on the high string, and then pull off to the index finger, and then pull off to the open string. Someone has pointed out you could do the same thing and hold the strings down if you use your little finger for a hammer-on, but I tend to be in the habit of doing it the other way, and it's less cramped. Okay, then we get, that's fairly straightforward. If you look at the tab, again, that's not too bad. Then a B minor. Okay, then we have the church chords again, and this stuff. Now we're going to do something a lot different. Here's this passage. This is nothing like as hard as it seems. Now, if we weren't trying to do this harp business, we could do it a lot easier. You could do it almost all on one string. But what we're going to do here is sort of walk this index finger across from the first to the second and then to the third strings, always on the 7th fret. So start like that. Your bass note now with your thumb is going up to the G string, which does happen sometimes. Okay, now I am using my middle finger here. Middle finger on the 10th fret of the 2nd string, followed by the 12th fret of the 3rd string with the little finger. Okay. Now, other people have told me it's a lot easier for them to use their ring finger there. You can use your ring finger, but do try both. I find that the middle finger is much easier. Okay, after that, as I said, the index finger comes across now the 2nd string. Then our ring finger goes down on the bass string when we play that open high string. And finally, the index finger is on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. So look at that very slow. A couple more times. Okay. And at the end, just jump down with your ring finger and the open high string. Okay. That shouldn't give too much trouble. When we go for our second B, we have the same thing as far as the left hand that we had before. But we're going to add some right hand notes. What we're going to do is we're going to play the bass string with our thumb, and that means that the voice that was on the bass, on the 4th string, except for the 1/5 string note, but a lot of that is going to have to be played with your index finger. Okay, so you see your thumb now on the bass string and your index string on the 4th string. Then the next bass notes are with your thumb. And when we do this thing of sliding up here with the index finger of your left hand to the 5th fret, again, your thumb goes down and gets another bass note. So it's really just those 2 bass notes. We'll try it a couple of times. Once more. Okay, then we go back to this again, the thumb and little finger. And this is the same. Now we have an interesting thing. Okay, this is a long little bass run. It sounds almost like a rock and roll thing. Reminds me of Silhouettes, but never mind. The way this is done, this bass run underneath the original thing, the melody, we're basically playing out of a B minor shape. So what we need to do is put a bar down with our index finger all the way on the 2nd fret over to the 5th string, and then come with your middle finger to the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And we're going to start by picking the 5th, 1st, and 2nd. And then we'll hammer on with our ring finger on that 5th string, 4th fret. Now, pick up everything except your middle finger. It can sort of be an anchor. Okay. Then when we play the open high string, that ring finger goes back down, and then your index finger goes down, not as a bar, but just on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. Okay. And at this point, still our middle finger hasn't moved. It's still sort of being an anchor. But now our little finger is on the 5th fret of the bass string. Then we pick the open fifth string, and that actually with your right hand is being picked by your index finger, and then your thumb of your right hand picks as we go with our left index finger to the second fret of the fifth string. So, and then that's a pull off. So what we have so far is and at the end, we could go with either our ring finger or little finger on the fifth fret of the bass string and make a pull off. So, or now, this is a shape that we've seen before where we have the ring finger and little finger on the fourth fret of the fifth and sixth strings. But let's watch out for the right hand a little bit here. Okay. To start with, it's fairly straightforward. That's just the fifth and fourth string being picked by the index and middle right fingers. And after that, we want to play these two strings, third and fifth, with our middle and thumb. Then the other two, the fourth and second, with our index and ring. Some tunes you sort of get into an alternation with those fingers moving around. You can't go very fast, but it gives a nice flow. So let's try that whole passage. All right, one more time. Okay, now we're back to our church chords. And we end as before. And I think at this point we're ready to split the screen up and take a nice slow run through on Sheebeg and Sheemore. speed it up just a little.